In the quiet, manicured streets of Willow Creek Estates, a upscale suburban enclave where every lawn was impeccably trimmed and every mailbox bore the stamp of conformity, a moving truck rumbled to a stop one crisp autumn afternoon. The vehicle, laden with boxes and furniture shrouded in protective wraps, pulled into the driveway of 47 Oakwood Lane, a house that had sat vacant for months after its elderly owners relocated. Out stepped a woman in her mid-40s, her posture straight as a rod, her movements efficient and purposeful. She was black, with closely cropped hair and an air of quiet authority that seemed out of place amid the neighborhood's predictable rhythm. From across the street, behind lace curtains in her pristine colonial-style home, Susan Hargrove watched with narrowed eyes. As the president of the Homeowners Association, Susan prided herself on maintaining the standards of Willow Creek. She had lived there for 2 decades, enforcing rules on everything from fence heights to holiday decorations with an iron fist. But this new arrival unsettled her deeply. The woman's skin color alone triggered a cascade of unspoken assumptions in Susan's mind, assumptions rooted in years of unchallenged biases. Who was she? How could she afford this place? Was she even supposed to be here? As the woman began unloading boxes, revealing glimpses of neatly packed military memorabilia and framed certificates, Susan's discomfort morphed into suspicion. She paced her living room, phone in hand, her heart rate quickening. This didn't fit the profile of Willow Creek's residents. It felt intrusive, almost threatening. Without a second thought, she dialed 911, her voice low and urgent as she reported a suspicious individual, potentially breaking into the property. "She's acting like she owns the place," Susan whispered into the receiver, "but I've never seen her before. Please send someone quickly." Sirens wailed in the distance, drawing neighbors to their windows. The woman paused, her expression unchanging as 2 patrol cars pulled up. Officers approached cautiously, hands hovering near their belts. Susan emerged from her house, arms crossed, a smug sense of righteousness swelling in her chest. Little did she know, this call would unravel everything she thought she controlled, exposing the ugly underbelly of her prejudices in a moment that would leave her frozen in place, confronted by a truth she couldn't ignore. The air thickened with anticipation as the confrontation unfolded, promising a twist that would challenge the very foundations of the neighborhood's fragile harmony. Jasmine Thompson had always been a woman defined by discipline and resilience. Born in a modest neighborhood in Atlanta, she joined the United States Army right out of high school, driven by desire to serve her country and escape the limitations imposed by her family's financial struggles. Over the next 25 years, she climbed the ranks, from a young recruit to a decorated lieutenant colonel. Her service included multiple deployments to conflict zones: Afghanistan, where she led logistics operations under fire, and Iraq, coordinating supply chains that saved countless lives. Medals for valor and commendations for leadership filled her record, but they came at a cost. The constant undercurrent of racial microaggressions within the ranks, the subtle doubts about her capabilities, the isolation of being one of the few black women in command positions. Now, at 46, Jasmine had retired honorably, her body bearing the scars of service, a faint limp from a shrapnel wound, the invisible weight of PTSD that she managed with quiet determination. She chose Willow Creek Estates for its promise of serenity, tree-lined streets, proximity to a veterans hospital, and a house large enough for her to host her extended family on holidays. The purchase had been straightforward. Her savings and pension covered it comfortably. As she signed the papers, she envisioned mornings with coffee on the porch, evenings tending a small garden, simple pleasures after years of chaos. Willow Creek, however, was a bubble of privilege, where diversity was more a buzzword than a reality. The majority of residents were white, affluent professionals who valued uniformity above all. The HOA, under Susan Hargrove's leadership, was notorious for its nitpicking bylaws. No visible trash cans, no unapproved paint colors, and an unspoken expectation that newcomers fit a certain mold. Susan, a 52-year-old real estate agent, had inherited her position from her late husband, who founded the association. She wielded it like a scepter, deriving a sense of power from her ability to dictate the neighborhood's aesthetic and social norms. Beneath her polished exterior, blonde bob, pearl earrings, and yoga-toned figure lurked a deep-seated fear of change, amplified by racial stereotypes she absorbed from news cycles and social media echo chambers. On moving day, Jasmine arrived early, her truck rented from a local company. She wore practical clothes, jeans, a faded army t-shirt, and sturdy boots. As she methodically unpacked, she noticed the curtains twitching in the house opposite hers. It wasn't unusual. New arrivals often drew curiosity, but Susan's gaze felt heavier, more judgmental. Jasmine pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. She carried in a box labeled Service Awards, placing it carefully in the living room. The house smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Unbeknownst to Jasmine, Susan's call to the police was fueled by more than mere suspicion. It was a reflexive act, born from a lifetime of privilege that blinded her to her own biases. As the sirens grew louder, the stage was set for an encounter that would peel back layers of injustice, forcing the neighborhood to confront the racism simmering just below its manicured surface. Curiosity built as neighbors whispered among themselves, wondering who this newcomer was and why Susan had escalated so quickly. The air hummed with unspoken questions, drawing everyone deeper into the unfolding drama. The patrol cars screeched to a halt in front of 47 Oakwood Lane, their lights flashing in rhythmic pulses that cast eerie shadows on the surrounding houses. Two officers, both white men in their 30s, stepped out, adjusting their belts as they scanned the scene. Jasmine straightened up from where she was bending over a box, her face a mask of composed neutrality honed from years of facing authority in uniform. She knew this script all too well. The unwarranted scrutiny, the assumption of wrongdoing simply because of her appearance. Susan hurried across the street, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement, her expression a mix of triumph and feigned concern. Neighbors began to gather at a distance. The elderly couple from next door peering from their porch, a young family pausing their afternoon walk, curiosity overriding discretion. The officers approached Jasmine first, one hand on their holsters, the other gesturing for her to step away from the truck. "Ma'am, we've received a report of suspicious activity here," the lead officer said, his tone firm but not yet accusatory. Jasmine nodded slowly, her hands visible at her sides, a habit from training to de-escalate situations. As the questioning began, Susan interjected from the sidelines, her voice carrying across the yard. She pointed accusingly, claiming the woman didn't belong, that the house had been empty and this sudden arrival looked like a break-in. The injustice of it all started to simmer in Jasmine's chest, the familiar sting of being profiled, of having her legitimacy questioned in a space she had every right to occupy. She provided her identification calmly, but Susan pressed on, insisting the police check the property records implying forgery or fraud. The officers, caught between protocol and the escalating tension, radioed for backup, prolonging the ordeal. Tension mounted as minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Jasmine felt the weight of eyes on her, the subtle erosion of her dignity. This wasn't just about a misunderstanding. It was a manifestation of systemic racism, where a black woman achieving success triggered discomfort and hostility. Neighbors murmured, some sympathetic, others echoing Susan's doubts in hushed tones. One resident, a middle-aged man, ventured closer, suggesting perhaps it was all a mix-up. But Susan shot him a glare that silenced him. The air grew thick with unspoken prejudices, the kind that fester in homogeneous communities like Willow Creek. Jasmine's mind raced back to her military days, the times she'd been passed over for promotions, the offhand comments about affirmative action, the isolation in mess halls. Here, in civilian life, it was the same battle, just without the camouflage. As the officers delved deeper, requesting proof of ownership, Jasmine produced the closing documents from her glove compartment. But Susan, undeterred, doubled down, her face flushing with self-righteous indignation. "I've lived here for years," she asserted, "and I know everyone. This doesn't add up." The emotional stakes heightened as Jasmine's composure began to crack ever so slightly, a tightening of her jaw, a flicker in her eyes. She thought of her children who would visit soon and how this incident could taint their perception of home. The injustice deepened, revealing the layers of racial bias that permeated even the most mundane interactions. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably, some recording on their phones, others retreating indoors to avoid association. The scene built to a boiling point, the tension coiling like a spring, ready to unleash in a moment that would expose the raw nerve of prejudice. The standoff reached its zenith as the backup officers arrived, their presence amplifying the spectacle. 4 uniformed figures now encircled Jasmine, the moving truck a silent witness to the unfolding drama. Susan stood triumphantly nearby, arms folded, convinced her vigilance had thwarted some imagined threat. The lead officer, reviewing the documents Jasmine provided, furrowed his brow, sensing inconsistencies not in the papers but in the caller's fervor. "Ma'am, these look legitimate," he murmured. But Susan interrupted, her voice rising in pitch, demanding a thorough search of the premises to confirm no illicit activity was afoot. Jasmine, feeling the heat of humiliation burn through her veins, decided enough was enough. The racial injustice, so palpably evident in this moment, ignited a resolve forged in the fires of her service. She reached slowly into her back pocket, her movements deliberate to avoid alarming the officers. From her wallet, she extracted a small, laminated card, her military identification, bearing the eagle insignia of the U.S. Army and her rank as lieutenant colonel. The card gleamed under the afternoon sun, its details crisp. Her photo in full-dress uniform, the dates of service spanning decades, and notations of commendations for bravery. She held it out, not with anger, but with the quiet authority of someone who had commanded battalions. "Officers, before this goes any further, you might want to see this." The lead officer took the ID, his eyes widening as he scanned it. Whispers rippled through the group as he passed it to his partner, who let out a low whistle. "Lieutenant Colonel Thompson." "Afghanistan vet?" The confirmation hung in the air, shifting the dynamic instantaneously. Susan, who had inched closer to oversee, caught sight of the card. Her face, moments ago etched with smug certainty, drained of color. She froze, her body rigid as if struck by an invisible force. The realization crashed over her like a wave. This suspicious woman was not only a legitimate homeowner, but a high-ranking military officer, a hero who had served the very country Susan claimed to love. The hypocrisy of her actions, calling the authorities on someone who had risked everything for freedom, exposed the depth of her racism. Susan's mouth opened, then closed, words failing her as the officers turned their gaze toward her. The intensity peaked as one officer handed the ID back to Jasmine with a respectful nod. "Thank you for your service, ma'am. We apologize for the inconvenience." The other officers shifted uncomfortably, their initial suspicion evaporating. Neighbors, now fully invested, murmured in shock. The elderly couple clapped softly, while the young family exchanged knowing glances. Susan remained rooted in place, her world crumbling. The emotional stakes were at their highest, Jasmine's quiet triumph contrasting Susan's public unraveling, highlighting the raw power of truth against prejudice. As the officers prepared to leave, they turned to Susan, their tones stern. "False reports waste resources, ma'am. We'll need to discuss this." Susan stammered incoherently, her authority shattered. The climax crested in this moment of reversal, where the oppressed became the empowered, and the oppressor faced the mirror of her own biases. Jasmine stood tall, the ID back in her pocket, but its impact lingering like an echo, forcing everyone present to reckon with the injustice that had brought them here. In the aftermath, the patrol cars departed, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. Jasmine resumed unloading her truck, her movements steady, though the adrenaline still coursed through her. Neighbors dispersed slowly, some offering awkward waves or murmurs of welcome, their perspectives subtly shifted by the spectacle. Susan retreated to her house, the door closing with a soft click that belied the storm within her. That evening, whispers spread through Willow Creek, texts, calls, and hushed conversations over fences, detailing the incident and Susan's misstep. Over the following weeks, the ripple effects unfolded. Susan faced backlash at the next HOA meeting. Residents questioned her judgment, citing the unnecessary escalation rooted in clear bias. She resigned her presidency quietly, her reputation tarnished, a stark reminder of how unchecked prejudices can erode one's standing. Jasmine, meanwhile, settled into her new home, her military memorabilia displayed proudly in the living room. She joined community events selectively, her presence a quiet force for change, inspiring conversations about diversity and inclusion. The incident, though painful, became a catalyst. Willow Creek began to evolve. Subtle shifts, like inclusive bylaws and neighborhood potlucks that celebrated varied backgrounds. Jasmine's story, shared anonymously online, resonated widely, highlighting the pervasive nature of racial profiling in everyday spaces. In the end, this tale underscores the enduring fight against racism, how assumptions based on skin color perpetuate injustice, and how confronting them head-on can foster growth. What if we all paused to question our biases before acting? Such reflections could transform communities, one frozen moment at a time.